All right, let's on to section 5, and a lot of this, what we're trying to do now is kind of wrap up all these concepts for you, so you have a good appreciation of how to interact with the non-physical and reasons for doing that and how to go about it. It's another one of Judy's artworks, and you notice there I am in the middle. And if you could see that close up, you would see that I'm reading a book called My Big Toe. I don't think you can see that much detail from where you are, but my alter ego is that little green guy. Okay. Let's talk about gaining access a little bit. The way you gain access, in a way even saying gaining access is kind of not a good phrase. You already have access. It's the way of exploring the access you've already got. Okay? It's just a matter of focusing your awareness in a different data stream. All these data streams are available to you, and you can focus. It's sort of like being on the internet. And the way you get to another web page is you click on somebody's URL, right? And then up comes the web page, and you get the data. It's almost that easy. You just have to tap into another data stream. You do that on the internet when you click that URL. That taps you into a different data stream, and now you get that data stream. Well, here you just use your intent. It's your intent that connects you from one data stream to another. But in a way, you have a similar problem as you have on the internet. There may be some data out there on the internet, but you don't know what the URL is. So how do you click on it to get it? This kind of gets you in that same problem. There's a lot of things out there, a lot of places to go, people to meet, babies to kiss, things to do. But if you don't have any notion of it, if you don't have any idea of it, then how do you get the URL? How do you know where to focus your intent? Well, that takes us back to the blind man in Times Square. It's that same thing. That's how you know. You take one step, and then you integrate that with where you were, and you just keep exploring out and out and making it bigger. So that's the process of getting there. Don't expect just to suddenly be blessed with all the knowledge of the larger reality system and be able to jump around in it however you want. You have to develop that knowledge yourself, and nobody can tell it to you. You have to develop it with your own exploration and experience. See, that's why back in the very beginning of yesterday we talked about why did Einstein and Bohm and Friedkin and all these people get stuck? Well, they got stuck because the next step was consciousness. But consciousness isn't something you do objectively. Consciousness is an inside experience. And they weren't there. They were looking for an objective solution. Consciousness is not that. Consciousness is subjective. So you have to go do it yourself. And you have to find those URLs, you have to experiment. So it's just like that blind man in Times Square. You just experiment and go forth. Interact. Little bits at a time, you'll learn more, and your map will get bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay. For the most part, access is a self-policing system. You're not going to get places generally until you're ready to go there. And that's just because there's no learning for you. In fact, there's a negative in learning. If you get someplace you're not equipped to be, usually you end up with a fear or confusion or some other thing that is not really an entropy reducer. It's more of an entropy increaser. So to take a fourth grader and put him in a calculus class isn't any advantage to the fourth grader. It just confuses them and makes them think that math doesn't make any sense. So it's not an advantage to jump into places that you cannot deal with the data you get there. So it's better this way. You get access as you are ready for access, as you kind of earn the access by your explorations and going. So it's self-policing. Those people that would like to take advantage of it, those people that would like to manipulate your mind and put thoughts in your head and do other kinds of things generally don't have the ability to do it. The reason they don't have the ability to do it is because they'd like to misuse it. That disqualifies them from access. So that's not always true. There are those dark practitioners, if you will, who can do things. But again, they're limited. But for the most case, if you get out of body and you're met by scary things that chase you away and you're horrified, then you're not ready for that experience yet. So access is self-policing. So we don't have to worry about, you know, generally the bad guys, you know, manipulating our minds, you know, with their evil intent and that sort of thing. In the margins, things like that can occasionally happen, but mostly that doesn't happen. They can't gain that power. It's not something that's easily done. We've talked about that gaining access is an act of intent and needs neither physical, emotional, nor intellectual process. In fact, those processes are inhibitors. Okay. Gaining access in the form of meditation is a matter of not doing rather than doing. It's not that you have to learn a new technique, you have to unlearn ego, beliefs, fear, expectations. You need to be differently. Okay, and when you reach that meditation point where you have let go of the physical data inputs, you're just a point consciousness floating in the void. And that's not as hard to get to as you think. It's just a practice of letting all the chatter, all the analysis go. And you get to that point and you're in a void because you're no longer paying any attention to the sensory inputs you get from, you know, heat and cold and sounds. And you have your eyes closed, so that blocks out most of the sight. And you just let that go. You no longer have your attention focused in the physical. That's why you're in the void. Now, you do a similar thing without ever thinking about it. You know, you think, gee, that's really, really hard. But if you've ever read a really good book, something that's really interesting, you know that all the rest of your reality disappears. You're just in that book with those characters experiencing it. You know, where's the kitchen and in the bedroom and the house and the traffic outside and all the things that are there and you can see and smell and hear, they disappear. They're gone. But instead of a void, you're in a story. But it's not that hard to let all the sensory stuff go. You know, we think about, gee, that's really difficult. We do it just like that when we're reading a book. Hardly even think about it. It all disappears. When we're reading that book, we don't notice the refrigerator running in the background, you know, the noise of the compressor or any of the rest of that stuff. So it's the same thing, not that hard to do. You get to this point where you just let go of all the input data coming to you. You're in a void. You're in a black spot. You are awareness. You're just a single point of existence. Okay. Now, there are lots of meditation practices and societies where you sit in the temple with your legs crossed for 20 years to get to that point. That's not required. That's part of their ritual. They learn that it's that hard, so it takes them that long. It doesn't have to take you that long. It's just a matter of letting go of your beliefs. If you believe that it's that hard, it will take you that long. And you'll have a hard time getting there. Just let go of those beliefs. It's really not that hard. So you get to this place of point consciousness, and when you're there, there is no body. Like I say, just like when you're reading a book, there is no body. There is no body. Well then, if there is no body, you are out of body. You just aren't out of body in the classical way that Bob Monroe described. Now, if you want to go to that classical approach, you can go there from there because it's now just a matter of your intent. When you're no longer aware of your body, you are, by definition, out of body. You didn't have to roll out, you didn't have to do anything. All you had to do is let go of the physical reality, your point consciousness. Your intent now will take you wherever you want to go. If you want a remote view, then use your intent to specify where you want to be and just observe. If you want to heal, bring up that person, that energy body, or whatever with your intent, define it. Do healing. If you want to go to one of these databases, use your intent to say, I want to visit the probable future. I want to experiment and do some what-if analysis in the past. You can do those things because you are free of this reality frame, and you can use your intent to do whatever you want. It takes practice. I'm making it sound really easy, right? It takes practice, because the thing that a lot of people will do, of course, is they'll get to that point, and suddenly they find themselves in the void, just a point of consciousness, and then it's, I'm here, and it's gone. So it's not as easy as it sounds. You have to work on it, but it's also not as hard as it sounds. It won't take you 20 years. You just have to work on it and get rid of your beliefs and your expectations. Now, when you get there and you want to, say, talk to someone, okay, you need to be open. You need to direct that inquiry. I'd like to talk to someone, and it might be a good idea to put some caveats on. I want to talk to someone who knows more about these things than I do, and who is, going to interact with me in a way that's good for my growth. And by putting that kind of intent on it, you've created a filter. And now you're only going to get those kinds of connections because that's what you've intended. Again, it's not a bunch of people running around out there. You're talking to the larger consciousness system of which we are all a part. So we're all online. We all have websites, if you like. It's just a matter of how you want to connect and what you want to connect to. Just like the guides are an interface to you, so is this questioning, so are the beings, so are these things. So it's none of us and it's all of us. All of the consciousness out there and all the various reality systems all have a web page. They're all online. They're all available for us to communicate, and we are available for them to communicate with us. So it's this huge network. I know this is mind-boggling. It's hard to get a grip on this, but that's the way it works, and you'll find that out. But remember, that blind guy in Times Square. That's basically the way you are. First thing you need to do is forget about everything that you've ever read about the non-physical. Remember, this is your experience. It's going to be unique to you because you're going to interpret it in your own way. Unfortunately, most of the people who travel don't understand that. They come back and they report what they see, like it was out there. Well, I found this beach, and I laid under this palm tree, and they believe there's a beach and a palm tree out there. Well, they had something that was relaxing. They had something that made them feel very mellow, and they interpreted that as a beach and a palm tree because that's the closest pattern match they had to that feeling. We do pattern matching. So that's how we do our metaphors. Basically, we have an experience. We get a feeling. We get data. And what does that data most closely match? What's the pattern that we have in our experience bank, our personal experience bank, that kind of matches that as close as possible? Well, if that feeling is one that you had, the most similar thing to it was you lying under a palm tree on a beach, then that's what comes up, and that's what you see, and that's the way you interpret it. Again, you have to interpret it in terms of your data. So don't take that too seriously. Don't come back and swear to everybody that there's palm trees growing in the larger reality because you sat under one of them on a beach. And don't read things in people's books and take them too literally. Okay? It's a pattern match kind of a process that's going on. And if you don't have any pattern at all to match it with, now sometimes the patterns aren't good matches. Sometimes your best match is a pretty ratty match, but that's what you'll do. You'll bring up something that is not a good match because you don't have anything that's a good match. Sometimes, if you don't have anything that's even a close match, you just won't see it. The data won't compute. It's like, like you had an experience, but there was nothing there. It's like an empty experience, and it's not because you didn't get the data, it's because you couldn't match it to anything. You had nothing to anchor it to. So that's all right, then just go have a different experience, something that you can deal with. You weren't ready for that experience. You didn't have enough experience of your own to deal with that. Let those go. Don't be frustrated with it and keep trying to go back and find out more about that. You'll get more chances as you grow. So it's a pattern match. That's how we come up with our metaphors. So obviously we're all walking around with different patterns. of our experience. So that's why we get different things. That's why the parapsychologists or the naysayers that look at what the parapsychologists do say, oh, it's all a bunch of bunk. None of it's consistent. Well, all these people seeing different things, they're all just making it up. Well, in a way, that's true. But yes, they are seeing things. And some of them are the same things. But they experience them differently. So the non-physical is not something that's easy to measure physically. And that's where the parapsychologists get in a big problem. They want to measure non-physical experiences. They want to measure your personal subjective experiences objectively. And it just doesn't work. And they're real frustrated because they just have a hard time taking that subjective experience and put it in an objective bottle. It's very difficult to do. And those who would be real critical of it, they're demanding a non-physical rock to examine. Well, that doesn't work either. If you say this is not real unless I have physical proof, well, you're asking for physical proof of something that's non-physical. You see, you're in a logical problem there. That doesn't work that way. So if the only proof that's suitable to you is physical proof, then you're never going to see any proof of the non-physical, because there is no physical proof of the non-physical. And again, non-physical is just a point of view. Just a point of view. Okay. Go forth, see what happens, experiment, gather evidence, be detached, have no expectations. All the same things that I told you when we were doing our healing, it's all the same things. You're your own worst enemy here as far as your ability to get around in these places. Stop judging, don't guess, work for a long time, take the long view, and always be skeptical. Just observe, be a scientist. Just go there and say, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I'm going to get anything or not, but I'm going to ask the question, and I'm just going to wait and see what happens. And as soon as something happens, don't start second guessing. Is that me? Is that something real? Just do it. Take the data. Be an observer. Don't have your ego attached to it. Take the long view. In 20 years, you might even be good at it. I know, I shouldn't say that. I should tell you that if you just give me a lot of money, I'll make you good at it next week, but that would be a lie. A lot of people will try to tell you that, but that's not true. Okay, making contact. When you want to talk to other entities, don't make a speech. Keep it very simple. Think like a lawyer. Lawyers, when they question their witnesses, want them to just answer yes or no. They never want them to actually speak whole sentences because they're not sure what they might say. You need to do the same. When you're talking to entities, ask the kind of questions that can be answered with very simple answers to begin with. So act like a lawyer. Ask questions that you get a digital answer, because that will be the easiest thing for you to comprehend. It's just a very simple answer. If you go up there and say, well, why does my Aunt Millie not like me? Well, that's a very complicated answer, and you're not going to be happy with the results. Say something more simple. Break that down into simple questions, and then you'll do a lot better. Now, eventually, they can get more and more complex as your ability to communicate gets better and better, and as your sense of the reality of the communication gets verified by experiment. But to begin with, simple, direct, easy to answer questions. Don't expect a lot of conversation. Okay, you're just trying to get information, you're making it as easy as possible. Then listen. Ask your question and listen. Don't be impatient. People ask their question, and if they don't get a reply in the next 3 seconds, it's like the failure, it's a failed experiment. Don't be impatient. Ask your question and wait. Give it some time. If nothing happens, ask it again a little differently. If nothing happens, ask it again with a little different twist on it. Try to ask some specific kind of entity. I want this particular kind of being with these particular qualifications to answer this question, please. Try that. work with it. There are probably connections to the larger system, but we'll call them entities, right? Guides or whatever, that are kind of seeing what's going on and wondering whether it's worth their time to make the connection. Is it going to be valuable to you? What are you interested in? What's your growth point? If answering this question is going to be something that's going to improve your evolution, or is it just your ego wants to find out an answer about something? And they decide whether to talk to you or not. So again, it's the kind of question. If you want to ask the magic mirror whether you're the fairest in the land, you're probably not going to get an answer. No, the larger system isn't going to care to answer that kind of a question. So it depends on how you approach it. Take your time, don't judge, be patient, be polite, but also don't go into this passively. You're not just a passive. I say just listen, that's true. But when something responds to you, don't be afraid to say, who are you? What's your point? And where are you coming from? Or if they give you information, don't be timid about asking questions. Now you can shift from a lawyer, that's just asking his client his name and his address. You can become an interrogator. Stay polite. It's not like you want to get in an argument. You're just there taking data. But you can ask any question you want. There are no impolite questions if they're sincere. You're not going to offend anyone. Just ask what's on your mind, and if you get confused, ask for clarification. So don't be passive. It's not like, oh, this is some big magic being and I'm just little me, and you feel real meek and you don't want to say anything or whatever. That's not it. Just be bold. Be fearless. If you're not fearless, you're liable to have experiences that are frightening. So being fearless is a very important part of this. If you have fear, that is going to create problems, everything you do, whether it's out of body, whether it's communication, whether it's remote viewing. Fear will be the big block. You have to have no fear. One of the ways that you can get no fear is to imagine what the worst is. What is the worst thing that could happen? Accept that. Say, all right, if that happens, I'm okay with it. Now maybe that worst thing is that you're going to die and you'll never come back and you'll be, trapped in the twilight zone forever, or whatever your imagination brings up that is your fear. Accept it. Say, all right, I'll accept that if that happens. It's worth it to me to find out. And you have to then just go in fearless. So if this creature, you meet some monster on the other side that growls at you, say, well, that's all right. I'll deal with it. I won't be afraid of it. Well, let's deal with it. And then you'll find that those monsters will disappear. They'll melt. They'll go away. They'll turn into a little old man with a cane and be real friendly. It's just a thing to see whether or not you're ready, whether or not you can deal with things without fear. All right, remote viewing is next. What you're doing when you remote view is that you're exploring databases. Okay, you can remote view into the future. That's the probable future database. You can remote view into the past. And if you're not good at what you're doing, you can get into the unactualized past, which is the things that never did happen, and then that confuses everybody. So remote viewers are people who have learned to focus intent on a particular thing and hold that intent. And that may be a way of knowing whether or not you're ready to do these things is when you get that point consciousness, when you're that point consciousness in the void. You ought to be able to attain that state for 20 minutes. You ought to be able to get to that state and just hang there. You don't have to do anything. It's a lovely place to be. Matter of fact, most people, after their first couple of journeys to the point consciousness, almost have to force themselves to come back to this reality frame, because that's just such a pleasant place to be. And you can just hang out there and just float, but you ought to be able to get to that point and hold it steady for say 15 or 20 minutes at least. Eventually, for an hour or an hour and a half, just get to that point and hold it. If you get there and in a couple of seconds it's gone and it comes back, then you're not quite really ready to do this because you don't have enough control yet over your intent. It keeps jumping around, which means as you start doing things, if it's an out-of-body experience or remote viewing or anything, you're going to start to get data, or you're going to heal, and bing, 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 you know, you're jumping all over the place. Your attention, your intent's just kind of flying around. It's not steady. So get to that point consciousness and hold it. Just drift there and enjoy it. When you get to the point that you feel real stable, then's the time to start thinking about, now what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? What would I like to experience? But make that a stable point for you to get to. Okay, remote viewers go to great lengths not to get their ego and their expectations involved. You know, they have these double and triple blind protocols that they are remote viewing to a location that's sealed in an envelope, and that's all they know about it. So they have to use their intent, just like we did with our healing. Let's go to that person that Tom told us about that needed healing, and that's all you need. That's unique. They want to go to that location that's in that envelope. Well, there's only one unique location in that envelope, and that's all the larger system needs to get them there. But if somebody tells them that it's in the jungles of India or something, well, they got all kinds of stuff going on. All right, they're expecting a lot of green bushes and tigers and lions and bears and stuff, and they get a whole bunch of junk that comes in that is just distracting and off the point to them. You know, so they don't want to know where it is. They just want to go to that location and then be an observer. What do they see? So because they cannot quiet their mind on their own, they need these protocols to help them. You don't have to have elaborate protocols. You can do this without having somebody seal things in envelopes and that sort of thing. But it's the same idea. You have to be able to control your mind, control your intent and focus. That's where the meditation comes in. Eventually, you will be able to get to that point in 2 seconds or less. You just go there. But you have to have a lot of familiarity with it. It's not something that takes a lot of trouble eventually. It's just shifting your focus. So there's probably a long way to go to get to that point. It does take a lot of practice, but you can get to that point without much ritual. If you do a lot of ritual to get there, if it takes you 20 minutes to get to that point, don't think of that 20 minutes as being necessary. It's only necessary for you now. Be open and say that, next time I'll do it in 18 minutes, or I'll skip this step, or I won't worry about relaxing my toes first. Just skip steps, and eventually you'll find that, gee, it works just as well if I skip those steps. And pretty soon you'll have it to where you can just shift your consciousness while you're having a conversation with somebody else. You can parallel process. It's a whole lot easier than we make it out. Okay, you need to have no fear. Again, your fear will color everything. You have to have no expectations. Detachment. You just sit there and let the experience unravel by itself. Don't guide what you're experiencing. You don't want to create it. You just want to observe it. Okay. Healing. We've done some of this, and so a lot of this will be old hat to you now. All you need is a unique address. Time is a variable, and today we're going to do some with our healing. We're going to go forward and backward in time. Generate your own healing tools. I'm going to give you an example of today when we do it. I'm going to give you some examples of tools, but don't take those as the tools. Just take those as examples. Matter of fact, all this healing exercises we're doing, it's not that I expect you to succeed in remote viewing and to succeed in healing someone. That's not the point. The point is to just give you an idea of how it's done, the techniques, the tools, how it works. You're going to have to go practice it and develop the ability on your own. No one can just give you a lecture and turn you into a healer. That won't work. You have to develop the ability. But it's good to know that you don't have to sit for 20 minutes first and get into just the right state before you do it. You can just do it. It's good to know that you can heal that one cell and then just say, oh, and I want all the rest of the cells to be like this one. Poof, they all are. Now, if you think that's impossible, then that won't work. But you can do those kinds of tricks, so you don't have to go in heal 6 million cells all individually. That would take you a long time. So there are little things that you can do with your intent that you wouldn't think of maybe, and those are the kinds of things you'll learn here today. With healing, I think we talked a little about this. Don't force your will on others. Be sensitive to the larger consciousness system, to the larger viewpoint of lowering entropy, and just healing an individual may not be the best thing. May not, that illness may be necessary. To have a maximum effect, you need to do it often and for a fairly long time. That's the best way to do it, is have it in the back of your mind. And what I mean by the back of your mind, if you have a very, very important appointment, someplace you really have to be at a certain time, you keep it in the back of your mind. You're aware of the time, all the time. You're aware of that appointment. I'm going to have this meeting. You know, I have to stop by the prize place and pick up my $1 million. And if I'm not there on time, I lose it. You know, you won't forget about that. You'll keep that in the back of your mind. This is what you do with your healing. Once you do that healing and you've turned that energy body bright white, keep it in the back of your mind all day, all night too, if you can, for the next couple of weeks, to where it's just there. You just have this. I mean, it's not like you have to sit down and you know, focus on it. It's just in the back of your mind. And there's that white energy body I made, and it's just bright and it's white. And it'll only take you 2 seconds. You just kind of think of it a second, and then you see it white, and then you go back to what you're doing, just like it would if you were worried about you know, what time it was. You know, you just kind of, for a minute, you kind of drop out of what you were doing, check on the time, and then go back. That's all it is, just moments. But do that all day long. Keep that ball rolling. Keep that energy going. And do that over a couple of weeks, and you'll see that you will be very, very effective with that sort of consistency. The better you get at it, and the more you can focus your mind, then the more power you can apply to modifying the reality in the margin that's allowed, you know, more quickly and more easily. But in the beginning, what you need to have is an effect, because it's the effect you have that's going to give you confidence that what you're doing is real. So that's the way to maximize your effect. Okay. So in a way, that's using parallel processing. You're here, but you're still there. You're still putting energy into that event. Okay, parallel processing is unnecessary to learn, but it sure does make more efficient use of your time. It's nice to be able to well, we'll use healing as an example, to be able to heal while you're talking to the person that's describing their ailments to you. You don't have to go home and work on it later. It's real easy if you can just do these things real time. The way you first learn parallel processing is you have to learn to break habits. The reason we don't parallel process is because we have rituals and habits that we have to go through. Notice that when you first learn to meditate, if you learn to meditate sitting down in a chair, and then you go lie down on a bed and try to meditate, you can't do it. It's like it just doesn't come, you can't make it work, it's impossible. On the other hand, if you learn to meditate while you were lying down, you try to meditate sitting in a chair, you just can't do it. You get habituated very quickly to things that you're used to. And that's a problem. If you only meditate in places where it's very quiet, you get in a noisy environment, you can't do it. Okay? So it's like that. What you need to do, once you get good at meditating, now don't try this while you're just learning. Don't try to do everything at once. It goes in steps. When you get good at meditating, when you can get to that point consciousness, when you can get to that state pretty well, you need to then start breaking your own habits. This will help you parallel process. The difficulty people have with parallel processing is their habits. Okay, so you break the habits, and how do you do that? Well, if you learn lying down, sit up. If you learn sit up, lie down. Once you can sit up and lie down, meditate while you're standing up. When you're riding in a bus, you know, going someplace and you're in that environment, meditate while you're on the bus. It will be hard at first. It'll be very difficult, and you'll kind of have this idea, oh, I can't do that. It doesn't work. But that, of course, is a belief that will make itself come true. You need to just persist and practice until you can do it. If you can meditate standing up, then meditate standing on one foot, Then you can meditate while you're walking around. Take a walk in the park. I wouldn't advise it if you are an acrobat and you're walking on a high wire to practice your meditation then, but take a time when you're safe. Don't learn to meditate while you're driving your car in rush hour traffic. That would be a bad choice. But learn to meditate under all sorts of conditions. That will then give you flexibility. Pretty soon you will find that you can be in a meditation state while you're doing all kinds of things. While you're doing your work. You can use it while you're working. It'll help you do whatever it is you do while you're working to have that bigger perspective. You find out that you can be in a meditation state healing the person that's telling you about their ailment. That you can, it becomes easier. So this is how you do it. Now some people do that naturally. They don't have to practice. They just kind of are in that state. They can connect to a larger reality while they're doing this, and they never heard any of this. They never practiced any of it in their life. They just kind of get there intuitively on their own. But most of us, we have to work at it. So that would be my advice. How to parallel process? Start with meditation and start meditating in any way, any position, any form, any amount of noise, any amount of light, and until it's easy to meditate under almost any condition. Okay. That's a very good way to learn this. Don't expect it to come quickly. It isn't easy. It just keeps getting easier the more you practice. Have patience with it. Okay. We talked a little bit about negative beings, but the one thing that you should know about negative beings is that your fear is like a big kick-me sign. When you go out and in these altered realities and you have fear, you might as well paint a big kick me, on your forehead, because you're going to attract all kinds of unpleasantness with that fear. You're going to manifest that fear in all sorts of ways. So you need to be fearless. Okay. The negative beings are not going to bother you if you are fearless. That's an important thing. Fearless. Now, most of us have fears that we don't even know we have. There's fears in there that we don't access with our intellect. Okay? You'll have to get to those, and you will get to them as you do this. You just have to become fearless. It's very unlikely that anything's going to hurt you. Doesn't mean it's impossible. It's just very unlikely. Don't worry about it. Yes, there are things in the larger reality that can hurt you and can give you problems. There are things in this reality that can hurt you and give you problems. It's the same sort of thing. You don't stay in your house because you're afraid if you go outside, somebody's going to mug you. You don't, stay away from the park because somebody might mug you. You don't never drive a car because you're afraid you're going to be in an accident. If you operated that way in this reality, you'd have to go find a hole and crawl in it and stay there. There is risk to everything, but the risk is small. So you drive your car, you walk in the park, you go out of your house, you fly in airplanes, you take trips, you do all those things because the alternative is basically not really living your life. It's the same way. Think of the larger reality the same way. Yes, there are things that can happen to you out there, but just don't worry about it. It's just not that. You have a higher probability of being mugged in the park probably than you do, going out of body and having something awful happen to you. So just don't worry about it. Accept the risk. Do it anyway. Be fearless. You're not frightened when you get in your car. Yet if you think about it intellectually, you probably have a pretty good reason to be. Driving a car can be fatal. But we just don't worry about it. It's the same thing with this. Don't worry about it. Let it go. Accept the risk. Life is risky. Existence is risky. Okay, next one is staying balanced. Remember why you're here. There are people who are very out of balance. There's a lot of us who are very out of balance because physical reality is the only thing in our view. There is nothing outside of the physical reality. That's kind of the left brain imbalance. The left brain dominates everything. Okay? But you can be imbalanced on the other side. You can spend 15 hours a day meditating and never get out and mix it up in the real world, and that's also unbalanced. That's not like a goal that everybody should try to attain, but we just don't have time because we have jobs and we live in a Western society that doesn't support that sort of thing. That's also unbalanced. The reason we're here is to interact, to learn, to grow. And we learn that by mixing it up with other people. That's where the opportunities come from. That's where we have an opportunity not to present with ego, rather to present with love. And if you stay in a cave, you lose all those opportunities. So meditating in a cave for 20 years will make you a very unbalanced person. You may learn a lot in one area, but there's a whole lot in other areas that you're missing. Better to integrate it all. You need to be at home in the large reality and at home in this reality. You need to interact and be effective in both. That's the goal, is balanced. So some people get so into this that they spend all of their time trying to get out of this reality. That's a mistake. You're in this reality for a purpose. Interact with that purpose. Do it. Make your choices. Okay. And some people are so focused here that they can't see the bigger picture. Nah, that's just as bad. Okay. So one of the things we get to, we get asked a lot, I get asked a lot is, what about 2012? What about the future? What do I need to know? Well, what you need to know about the future is nothing. You don't need to know anything at all about the future, except what comes and deal with it. That's what we're here for. When you get into these concepts of worrying about what's going to happen and getting ready for it, that's fear-based for the most part. The more you think about that, the more fearful it gets. People tend to get into a fear-induced spiral where, it starts and maybe it's just a little bit of inquisitiveness, or I just want to make sure I'm ready, or I'm not really afraid, and that. But the more you get into that, the more that fear traps you, and you get into a spiral that just degenerates. I'd say stay away from those sorts of interests. You don't need to go there. What happens will happen. Whether you survive or not is really not all that important. That's not the game here. That's the physical game. The bigger game is experience, do, interact, deal with what comes. So don't worry about what's coming in the future. Let that fear go. Matter of fact, you should live your life in the present. Always just be present. Let the future take care of itself. The past is gone. Learn from it. Live in the present. And what happens in the future just is the way it happens. You'll be wherever it is you're supposed to be. Follow your intuition and let it go. So don't get involved in the fear cycles that have to do with prognostication. All right. Common barriers. What are the things that inhibit us? Fear, obviously, is the big one. Belief is also a big one. Another one that you might not look at is an inability to accept uncertainty. Actually, an inability to accept uncertainty is the basis of a lot of our fear. That's kind of the root cause of a great deal of our fear, is that we want to know for sure. We want to be sure. We don't want to go out of body if we think something's going to get us. There's uncertainty there. We're worried about 2012 or something if if we've read all these horror stories about how awful things are, so we want to know. And this not knowing gnaws at us. That's often your fear talking. Okay, so be able to accept uncertainty and live with it. Okay, you don't know how this is going to work out. You have a new relationship. You don't know how this relationship is going to work out. Let it work out. Be who you are. Get yourself right. Make your own decisions right. Make your own intents correct. And everything else will take care of itself. You don't have to manipulate your reality to be the way you want it. Your reality will be the way you need it. Learn from it. Everything's there for your education. Learn from it. If what you need is pain, you'll get pain. Try to get in a position where what you need is not pain. Then your life will be better. Okay? So the common is this fear, inability to accept uncertainty, expectation. You have wants. You expect people to be a certain way and to act certain ways, and they upset you if they don't. Let that go. Inability to comprehend the big picture by habitual conditioning. We call that brainwashing, I guess, to PMR concepts. Just remember that you cannot determine what's in the superset from the subset. I guess that kind of rolls it up as much as anything else. Let all the stuff that you don't know go. If you need to know it, you'll find it. If you don't know it, if you don't need it, it's not important. So you need to just be in the present, live your life, and let the rest of it fall where it falls. Let it work out. And if it doesn't seem to be working out right for you, that's because of you. You're not being right. You're not making the right choices. You're working from ego. You're working from fear. You're working from expectations. So fix yourself and let everything else take care of itself. That will be your optimal thing.